Welcome to the Sedona Soul Sisters Show, down-to-earth discussions on metaphysics, spirituality, paranormal, and healing. The Sedona Soul Sisters are myself, Ivory Lanou, my business partner, Roz Reynolds, and our great friend, Terry Ann Russell right there. We have offices in Sedona, Arizona, where we see clients from all over the world. Today's topic is wonderful tales of alternative healing. If you have questions or comments on today's topic, you can either put your hand up and we'll unmute you so that you can ask it on the show, or you can also put it in the show chat room, which I want to make sure I can see. You can just type it into the show chat room and we'll answer it there live as well. If you're watching the show later on YouTube, email us your questions. We're happy to answer them after the show as well. No problem. So we actually, between the three of us, I only offer two kinds of healing, but I have quite a lot of stories to tell about it. Terry Ann offers a multitude of healing. That's her focus in her work. And Roz does crystal healing. So there's quite a variety that we've done. I know, Terry Ann, I'm sure that you've got some things, you being the designated healer of the bunch here.
Well, you know, healing is my first love, and you guys know my story with my daughter, so that's really how it all came to be. It was probably, I'm trying to think, early, like 2013. She was getting sick again, and she was requiring blood transfusions every month. And every month we'd fill her up again, and then she'd be depleted, her hemoglobin would drop. And through traditional medicine, we did that for over 3 years. And during that time, I kept getting this nudge to do something different. But, you know, I was also very entrenched in my beliefs, and I had a lot of people around me that were like, traditional medicine, you have to listen to the doctors. They know what they're doing. You know, so I was sort of had that fight with myself back and forth. And finally I said, screw it, I'm doing it. I'm going to get her out of this. And so through that 3-year period, I found Reiki, and Reiki was my start where everything in my life changed. I took a Reiki 1 class. I started doing the self-healing on myself. I did Reiki 2, I did Reiki Master, and then Reiki Master Teacher. And throughout that progression, I was able then to work with my daughter extensively and begin to help heal her and myself through my own, you know, wounds from this life and past lives. And she is now 4 years hospital free with no blood transfusions. And her doctors are always astounded. Every time I take her for a checkup, she goes once a year now to the hematologist oncologist, and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, energy healing.
They don't like hearing that though, do they?
No, but they can't argue with it, you know? I mean, she has not had a blood transfusion. She was getting blood transfusions month after month after month. And now for 4 years, she's had no blood transfusions with no answers as to, you know, why this happened, why it didn't happen. They did tons and tons of tests on her, and nobody could find, you know, where she was bleeding internally. Nobody would, you know, go in and take that chance and do that surgery on her because it was too dangerous. They said she would die if she had that surgery. So it was like, but now she's 4 years hospital free. Woohoo!
That's
Awesome.
huge. I love
That is huge.
Yeah. So there's many stories like that.
I hope they see this and think about it, because I know that for myself, I used to do a lot more healing before I had my back issues. But people would come in and say, you know, I just don't know what to do. I've tried everything and I'm in pain all the time, or my situation's getting worse. And then they'll come to alternative medicine. Then they'll be open to it. I mean, we've all seen that over and over again. I'd like to, whoop, we got another person coming in. Let me let them into the room. I'd like to see more people opening up to that as one of the first things that they consider, instead of after they've exhausted all their options with traditional medicine. It's kind of like I started with Reiki too, but I really never worked on a lot of people with Reiki till after I learned medical Qigong energy healing. But I always think about the first experience I had that really sold me on it. I was still taking the classes in Prescott from this wonderful Dr. Jan Kennedy. She was amazing. And we had classes all day Saturday through a long period of time. And my sister at that time was going through some more serious kidney issues. It's been an ongoing issue for her. And she was pending a surgery, and her lower right abdomen and inner thigh were tremendously swollen. She was in so much pain and discomfort, and the doctors told her there's nothing they could do till the surgery, and she couldn't sleep. There was no comfortable position. She was just sobbing, and her husband called me and, can you do something? He used to call this my voodoo, but at that moment he was really open to it. And I asked my instructor, and she said, oh, have your sister come to our next class. And so a group of us worked on her, and she went back home. And later the next morning, she told me by the time she went to bed that night, the swelling was gone, the discomfort and pain was gone. And that's kind of the similar thing as her doctor said, what did you do? My sister and her friends did energy healing. And he's like, well, it can't be that. But since then, that
Of course not.
over 20 years ago. And since then, I've worked on her numerous times, and her husband, for physical things that they have going. So that was when I just like, oh my gosh, this is something I'm really going to dive into and embrace, and I need to start sharing this.
I like that. I like when the people that are really like non-believers and then they need you. My son also did that. He broke his finger at work, and he doesn't believe in Reiki or any of that. But he called me and he's like, please, could you send me some Reiki? I think I broke my finger. And so I sent him Reiki. I helped him. And then he calls me later and he's like, I was feeling all this tingling and numbness in my hand, and I can move my finger now. Do you think it's broken? So I love stories like that, because it really helps people to see, then people who would technically be a non-believer, then to have this experience, this physical experience of healing. I just think it's wonderful. So many stories to share.
There are.
It's, the interesting thing to me is, like, in the 70s, we went through this period of like back to nature. Everything was about making tinctures, and I loved to do that back then, and growing your own herbs and all of this other stuff that we were doing. And there was such a shift in the perception at that time of energy healing, but it wasn't called that. But it was so amazing. And then we got to the 80s, and it just like went blip, off the radar screen. Now it's back. And I mean, actually, it started really becoming visible again, right around maybe the late 90s or 2000. And we hear more and more and more about it. And I read all the time. So I've read a lot of articles about how actually hospitals now are very quietly calling in Reiki practitioners, calling in energy healers. There's a couple of very famous energy healers across the country that are on kind of like on call and available. And they're both in-person and distance healers. And so I feel like, we're finally, our consciousness has been buried somewhere, and it's finally kind of coming to the surface, and we're realizing, because we are a mind, body, spirit being, and we have to acknowledge that, all of these things need to be being managed at the same
Which is
time.
really going back to the way people used to look at health. So here we are cycling, just like fashion trends go in cycles, so does health. And actually, when I learned Reiki was 92, and I learned medical Qigong energy healing in about 94, so it was right before it started really coming out again. My first couple examples are family members, and that's because for quite a long time, I only worked on my family, friends, and people who were referred to me. I never charged. I just did it because I loved it so much. I still do. So the next example I want to talk about is pretty dramatic, and it's about my mom. And it was Thanksgiving weekend. We had all gathered in Alabama at the lake house. Now, their lake house they had then was 45 minutes away from a hospital or any kind of medical facility. If we called an ambulance, they couldn't have found it. And the whole family was there. And what my mom has severe scoliosis, so her back is very fragile. And she's also stubborn as all get out. So she lifted up the corner of the bed to do something, and her back hurt really bad. And her big upset was, I have my family here. I want to spend time with the kids, the grandkids. I want to enjoy the holiday. I'm like, Mom, we should take you to the hospital. No, I'm not going. So I'm like, all right, then we went up the hill my dad drove her up the hill to the little cabin, and I worked on her up there where it was quiet for 4.5 hours. I did Reiki, I did medical Qigong energy healing on her, and after that, she was fine. She was coming down, she had no pain, and she was able to enjoy the weekend with really no problems. But I insisted, and so did my dad, that she go to the hospital once the weekend was over, and she had broken her back in several places. And they're like, how are you functioning? When did this happen? Like 3 or 4 days ago? They're like, I don't understand. He's like, well, my daughter worked on me. And they were actually very interested in it, but I don't think it did not completely heal a broken back, but what it did was take away the pain, and we just made her take it as easy as you could possibly make my mom take things. And she was able to get through the holiday, and she had no repercussions physically from waiting that time. So that was another kind of aha moment for me. I'm like, because I wasn't so sure that it would do much for her, but it really did.
Yeah. Well, we get into our heads sometimes too. When I first started, I had gotten a really early client, and she was in India. So I was doing distance healing. I was all up in my ego, my head. I was like, I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know how I'm supposed to do this. And finally, I just got to a place of quiet, shut down my ego, and I was able to do distance healing. And she had called me. So they're like, I don't remember if they were 12 hours ahead, but it was like the next day or whatever. So she called and she said, oh my God, that was so amazing. I could feel all this warmth in my body and this tingling, and I really feel so much better. And I was like, woo, thank goodness. But it's true, like distance or in person, like people always want to come see me in person. And I'm like, well, you can do it distant. I know, but I want to see you,
That's
you know.
me.
That's you. Mm-hmm.
I think that brings up another really good point that, we are so cultured, like, to think that, everything has to be in the physical, in the hologram. We have to be able to see it, feel it, touch it, the five senses. This is all sixth sense abilities, because we all have a sixth sense. And it's not talked about a lot, it's not dealt with a lot, but when you have that knowing within yourself that the energy that you're sending is being received, I mean, you can feel that when you're doing it, and you can feel those adjustments that are occurring, no matter where you're working on someone or you're trying to help them. So I think we lose a little of the knowledge aspect, and people need to realize, hey, feel this, feel this, feel your energy moving through you. And I say your energy, I mean, it's not my energy. I'm bringing energy through me and sending it out, but I can most definitely feel that. And I know you ladies can feel that too. And I always tell my clients, when I keep this healing list, and I put people's names on it, and I just read it every day, and I just send out the energy for all these people who need help, who need healing, may they receive whatever it is they need. I'm not even necessarily sending that. I'm just asking. And we can all do that. We can all make that effort and send that love and that light of healing to people. So it just expands all of our abilities, all of us.
That brings out another good point, Roz, is that anybody can do energy healing.
Yeah.
We all have an innate ability to heal. And when people are starting on a spiritual journey, one of the first things I recommend is take a Reiki class. That seems to really start awakening things within people, but it also starts giving them the confidence that they too can heal. And even if you are not interested, most people who take an energy healing class aren't interested in doing it professionally. They're doing it for themselves, their family, their friends. And I'm going to say it again. I was told by the angels back in the 80s that it wouldn't be very long before all we have is energy healing, herbal, and essential oils, and that's it. So that's one of the reasons that I think I was so guided to do this, is because I know that I need to have that skill for the people I know. Probably the first big situation I had of healing somebody outside of my family was somebody who heard about me, and they had cancer. And they had several tumors, and they'd had a surgery, and they were told that they were not a good candidate for more surgery. So they actually came to Arizona and stayed for 2 weeks, and I worked on them twice a day for an hour, doing medical Qigong energy healing, which is hands-on, by the way. And what happened when they came to see me, they were extremely frail. This person was older, and they were extremely frail, and they had these large red rings around their eyes that were real visible. Their face was very pale gray. Their eyes were dull. I could feel their energy was just incredibly depleted. And they're usually an extremely vivacious person. So after working on them for the first day, they started needing to sleep more, which is a good sign. By the second day, her appetite was coming back. By the third day, the red rings were gone from around her eyes, and she started having more sparkle to her eyes again. By the end of that 2-week period, she looked so good. Like, their skin tone was good. She was excited. She wanted to go do some things. She was feeling good. She went home and had her test done, and there were no tumors. And her oncologist said, I don't understand, what happened? Well, I went and saw, this woman in Arizona, and she did energy healing on me. And it was again he didn't say it, but she said he had a look like, well, it could possibly be that. But she stayed in remission for a long time. So that I really, again, had told her from the beginning that I had never worked on somebody for cancer, but that medical Qigong energy healing, there's plenty of people who do it, who regularly work on people with cancer, and that it was very powerful for that. So that was another, like, as I'm helping these people, I'm learning. I am getting these incredible lessons for how powerful it is. Like, I knew taking the class that it was going to be very helpful, but I didn't realize that it would be like that. For me, for Reiki, like, I was thinking about, just now it brought to mind, I was on a camping trip, and we were at a remote location, and a little girl, there was like a grill over the fire where people had been cooking food. She tripped, and her hand went right on the grill. And her parents would not take her to the hospital. I was so mad. And I thought, okay, I can't make them do this. The ambulance wouldn't have found us out where we were in the woods. So I just sat. I remember just kneeling in front of her, and I put her hand in mine. So I had one hand under it, one hand over, and I just did Reiki energy healing on her. And she stopped screaming, and she stopped crying. She calmed down. And I told her mom, like, if she wakes up in pain, wake me up, I'll come heal her. But she slept through the night, and the next day there was barely a mark on her hand, which
Wow.
is just insane because I saw that hand. Like I had a flashlight. I looked at her hand. There were at least second-degree burns on that hand. So I just wanted to throw that in there too. So I
Hmm.
had some pretty amazing stories with Reiki as well.
That's awesome. That's why, when I teach Reiki 1, and Kathy's going to be one of my students next week, I have a Reiki 1 class coming up. Reiki 1 really teaches that self-empowerment for us. And we do the 21 days of self-healing. And it's I find with clients, even if they don't want to go into energy healing, like you said, even if they don't want to have this for their lifestyle, they are able then to actually begin to heal themselves. So the things within them that have held them back previously, they learn all the hand movements and they start doing energy healing for themselves. That's really the first step, I think. And as you said, Reiki opens up a whole new world. I've had many friends who started with Reiki 1, and it just really started to snowball after that. Things have started changing. They got more psychic insights. They started to have their awakening, and it really is like the first process sometimes for some people that may not really understand what their spiritual path is, or that they're on a spiritual path, but they're just being guided then to start with Reiki 1.
I think it's a very good starting point.
Mhm.
I think that's a really good point to touch on too, is that all of these gifts that we are given the power to use, all of these gifts are not in separate little boxes. Healing is one frequency, healing energy. Psychic ability is another frequency, and they are interconnected. I'm not a medical intuitive, but I have a lot of people who've been referred to me who come to me and say, I'm having this problem. And I know you ladies get this too. I'm having this problem. I've been to all these different doctors. I've tried all these different things. Nothing is working. And we're tuned in on the frequencies around their body and their spirit. And we're able to connect with those things that are going on in those different frequencies that are causing issues. And to be able to say, okay, I'm seeing these words, and I'm seeing inflammation, or I'm seeing I'm realizing that this is an old injury that you had, and it's coming to the surface now because of whatever has happened. It's inflammatory. And you know um, I think people, when they're seeking help and they've tried a lot of the traditional things, that does kind of force them. And certainly you acknowledge that, Terry Ann, with Sophia, where you just were going, okay, none of this is working, not working for me. And I think people realize too, when medications don't work appropriately for what they're trying to resolve. And that's certainly my experience. And so consequently, I've been able to help a lot of people and just kind of give them a direction of like, I think you should look into this. And then they follow up on that and they find out that, yeah, no test showed that, but that's the situation. So it it does interconnect. All of our gifts interconnect.
Yeah, I never put myself out there as a medical intuitive. I do not consider that to be a service I offer, but I get a lot of referrals for it. And for
Yeah.
me, with that, I just wanted to add everything that you said, Roz, is exactly true for me as well. But one other thing is that I really feel it in my body. Like I'll
Me
feel a
too.
blockage. I'll feel where
Hmm.
the energy is in
Yes,
my body, and I'll feel
exactly.
like a pressure or expansion, like there's swelling. I'll feel like there's a blockage, and those end up being true when they get tests done for that and find out that was exactly, it was in that part of the body. That's exactly what was going on. And it always kind of like surprised me, like, because I didn't even know I could do that, but it came through very clearly. And um, so no, I'm not a medical intuitive. Let me put that out there again. But to me, that's a specialty within our world of psychics. It's a very much a specialty, and I feel like they can offer things I don't do.
Right.
And yet,
That's funny.
like you said, once people know you have good psychic skills, they come to you for all kinds of things. When you're right, they're going to send people they know.
Yeah.
to
That's funny you mentioned that, because it takes me back to a story. I was working on one of my first clients when I first came to Sedona, and she had come in and she hadn't told me what was going on, but during the session I started burping a lot and I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my gosh. And then when I was tuning in, I'm like, you have acid reflux, there's a lot going on in here. But I was like so mortified that I was in this whole session like burping up a storm. And she's like, how did you know that? And I'm like, well, I'm burping for one. I can feel this acid in my esophagus and my throat. But I was like, oh my gosh.
And see, if you hadn't thought to connect that with your client, you might have just focused on, oh, that was so embarrassing, and not work on, oh, that's about her. And that's the whole thing, is like when we're doing readings, if it involves something physical, you have to pay attention to what you feel and then think, do I feel that? Did I feel it before this session? Did I feel that before I tuned into her? And something, especially if it's things like, let's say I have some back issues. And so if I'm talking to a client about their health and I feel something in my back, I have to take a step back and like, is that my issue? Is it theirs? And I'll ask the angels, like, okay, is this about the client or is this mine? And they're like, oh, it's about the client. So it can be a little tricky to differentiate that sometimes when you have your own health issues.
Yeah, and then pay attention afterwards when you're done too, that it goes away and you don't feel it any longer.
Yes, exactly.
And that you don't hold it.
Yes.
I've had a lot of people come in and say, oh, well, I went to someone, but they wouldn't, they were afraid to help me because they said they might hold on to that. And it is about moving energy through you and through your client and allowing them to extract whatever it is they need of those frequencies, and then release it and let it fly away and dissipate.
When I was new at it, I had a problem with that. And I can remember I was on another camping trip. Things happen on camping trips. So I was on a camping trip and it was a huge event, like 20,000 people. And there's always some element of these huge events that are less than desirable. And one of the young guys had gone to some party at another camp, and somebody had put something in their drink, and they had these terrible stomach pains, cramping, vomiting, and he would not go to the hospital. What is with these people? So I sat behind him. I put my camp chair behind him, and he was sitting around the campfire. And I just put my hands on his back, and I was working where I felt the heat. And I would just put the energy into there. And he said, okay, I'm feeling better. And he stopped feeling sick, and the stomach cramps went away. And he's like, I'm just going to go to bed. Then I was up the rest of the night with stomach cramps, nausea, and feeling like I was going to get sick. And I'm like, I remember telling my Qigong instructor, and she's like, oh, that's got to stop. You're not supposed to take it into yourself. So we worked on that, and then I never had that problem again. Once like you were saying, Terry Ann, like, do I feel it afterwards? Once I tell a person something about health, it goes away. And then I know for sure that it was all about them.
Yeah, but it does take a while in the beginning to discern what it is, where you're getting this information, because we're all intuitive in different ways too. So somebody may not be feeling in their body what their client's feeling. They may see it more or hear it more or just know it. But for me, I'm very feeling like you. So I feel it in my body, and I always feel it very intensely. And in the beginning, I wasn't like you also, just taking it all in for them. And I was, and I had to learn how to release that as well. So it is a learning process.
And I used to have that same problem with, like, I think I told you ladies, and I've told plenty of people, that when I first started doing mediumship, particularly, like, I feel things in my body associated with the deceased person's health. And let's say that they were in an auto accident and had a really bad injury to their torso, I would feel this agonizing pain in my torso, and it would just about wipe me out, and it would last for days. I'd feel awful. And I finally just asked my angels, please only let me feel this minimally, like where it is and generally what's going on. And now that's true for everything. I don't feel the worst thing, the one thing that never works with for me is emotional pain. I still feel that, maybe because I'm an empath, but I feel people's emotional pain like a wham. That never lessened.
Yeah.
Gotta work on that stuff. It's very easy to, when you're really sensitive and empathic, it's really easy to hold on to that because you want to help. And, you know, it has to be kind of a conscious shift of energy where you're saying, okay, you know, and a lot of people who, I noticed this too, a lot of people, sometimes I'll have sessions kind of backed up, like I'll have a group of people in or something. And what I realize is they're saying, well, don't you need 10 minutes or don't you need 15 minutes to between? And I'm like, no, because I move that energy out. And we have to remind ourselves to do that when we're dealing with any kind of illness, physical, physical reactions, physical illness. We have to remind ourselves to clear that out.
For me, it's not about hanging on to it. It's about how it hits me when I first detect it. Like a physical thing, it'll be, I'll feel it. Like, let's say it's a heart thing. I'll feel it in the heart, and I'll feel generally what's going on. Like, I can tell it's a heart attack, but it's a pretty mild feeling for me. But if it's an emotional thing, it's like someone punches me in the solar plexus, and then as soon as I tell them, it's gone.
Yeah.
So
it's so interesting.
That, like a big thing that happened, and this is actually just, this is, I think, one of the best things about medical Qigong energy healing is what it does for people's energy. And I had a lady come see me from Phoenix area when Roz and I worked at another place in Sedona, and she looked terrible. She had been through a horrific, she lost her husband and then had found out he had been a sex addict and had been cheating. And when it was just such a double whammy to her emotional state to lose him and then find this out about someone she loved. She had just not been eating. Again, it was similar to the lady with cancer because her skin was gray. She could barely move. She was moving like she was elderly, and she wasn't. Her skin just had that gray cast. Her eyes were completely dull. She could barely get up on my massage table that I did healing on. And I worked on her for about an hour and a half at her request. When she sat up on the edge of the table, there was like this transformation. I wouldn't have recognized her. Her skin had a flush to the cheeks again. Her eyes were sparkling. She sat up like, nothing, like, woof, and she hopped off the table. And I'm like, how are you feeling? She goes, I feel fantastic. I said, well, you might be tired. You might take a little rest. Well, I'm just going to drive home. And since then, I said, you might need another treatment, but I've been in touch with her. That was a little over 5 years ago, and she's still got great energy. So, sometimes with energy healing, it's not like you have to have a whole series, it's just, you need a infusion of energy. You need to unblock your energy channels and let things flow again. I've seen that again and again and again with other people through the years, that same just like amazing transformation over the course of one treatment, which just blows my mind. I know I'm the one doing it, but it blows my mind anyway.
Yeah. And she was ready, a lot of times too, people will come in, but they're really not ready to give up what's making them sick. A lot of times they're just so attached to it. So a lot of times, you can do the healing on them, but they're like, they're not going to receive what they need, because they're really not open to letting all of that go, you know. So sometimes they do need more than one session or some deeper work. So when you see somebody like that jumps up and they're like, I feel great, and you're like, that's wonderful, you know, they were really ready to let it go.
I think that's a really relevant thing to realize too, is it took me such a long time when I was in my 20s and 30s to come to the realization that you can only help people to the extent that they will allow you to help them. They have to allow wellness. They have to, I mean, it sounds, it sounds ridiculous because of course everyone wants to be well, but we have to realize that sometimes we do hang on to emotional events. We hang on to things that have impacted us so dramatically. And sometimes people, of course, don't even realize that they're still immersed in that frequency of holding on to all of those things. That, and, that also brings up the subject of people who, um, you know, I sort of hesitate to even bring this up, but the reality is everybody thinks that the world that we see, our little hologram that we live in, is all there is. The reality is that there are entities and beings that are out in these other frequencies, and sometimes they like to attach themselves to us for whatever reason. And that's a whole other complication because that affects us in mind, body, spirit too. And helping someone even realize that that is a possibility, like, is sometimes, an adventure in itself, because I've had so many situations where I was dealing with hauntings, or I was dealing with people who can't figure out why their life is kind of going wacko. And in fairness to them, it's not necessarily always them.
Right.
So
That's a
really,
good topic. Maybe we should talk about that next week.
yeah, I mean, I just feel like, we're so mind controlled to believe that everything in our world is only what we see. And that is not reality. That is not reality at all.
And the more
And
you go on your journey, the more your view of what the world really is expands.
yep, it broadens. You begin to see, I mean, I certainly, and I've been, I've always told people this from the time I was a little kid. I saw into other dimensions and I saw other beings. Some of them are nice, some of them are not nice, and they don't have good intention for us.
Right.
So accepting that and realizing that, I mean, those of us who do this in a mindset of helping others, we have to realize that we're not the only presences always that we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's funny because, when I started doing this work, my vibration was so high and I was not able to experience. So from my experience, those darker, lower energies, I knew they existed, but I wasn't able to experience them. And we've talked about this when Anthony died. I was under deep, dark attack from these lower frequencies. And then I had fully experienced it, but I was able to see it for what it was. I knew that it wasn't me, right?
Yeah.
And so some people don't understand that that's not them that's speaking, or, they just can't conceptualize. They can't understand how this even happens. How do I take on an entity like this, or how it happens? But I had that knowledge. And so after he had passed, I had a lot of clients coming to me that were under dark attacks too. And I thought it was very interesting then how many were then attracted to me so that I could help them through that, because now this was my experience.
There's a very good book on this subject that I've referred to people. And of course, everything that you find in a book is something that's been relevant to that individual that wrote the book. So your situation could be different, but It's by Judy Hall, and it's about dealing with dark attack and psychic attack. And I think just opening your mind and opening your heart and spirit to the reality that, you know, we have to keep our frequency at a level that repels. And I always, you know, I've said this for years, but I mean, I literally put myself in a white light bubble. But, you know, I'm a person too. I've had difficulties, I've had struggles in my life. And when your frequency gets low enough, you know, you are vulnerable to these things. And your situation, Terry Ann, is classic, really. Here you are, you're going along in your life, and all of a sudden, everything in a moment is changed.
Mm-hmm.
And you're unprepared. You
Mm-hmm.
can't be prepared for that.
No.
And then you are subject to these attacks. And, you know, I mean, I've had people come to me and say, and this is, I mean, over years of this, come in and say, okay, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I'm struggling with depression. That's not like me. I feel suicidal sometimes. That's not the kind of person I am. And to present to them the idea that, okay, this is what I see around you. So let's get rid of that guy. Let's remove, let's elevate our frequency.
Sometimes they're open to it and they'll
Yeah.
listen. Sometimes they're so resistant to that there's nothing you can do. I mean, I had that with a client. I told you about this, Roz, a couple of years ago, where
Yeah.
he did not want to hear it. He didn't want to acknowledge that. He didn't want to work on that. And that, what can I do? But I wanted to say, during this pandemic situation, the lockdown and all of that, I've been having so many people calling me who are having the exact same thing. Some of it's completely understandable given the chaos going on in many different ways in our country right now and in the world, to feel depressed, anxious, but the suicidal thoughts are really high and dark thoughts. And I'm seeing a whole increase in that since this started, especially starting in April. So I can't do my healing on people because the healing I do is generally touch other than thought field therapy, which I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I ended up talking to my angels and they're like, they helped me come up with this type of healing I call angelic resonance healing, which is done at a distance, which is helping people. Like, I'll work on them for the issues we're talking about, and then they'll tell me that they're feeling a lot better. They feel like they see the beauty in the world again. They are having some moments of joy. They're able to feel lighter and brighter. And that's another thing, like Terry Ann was saying, you don't have to be in person to benefit from a lot of alternative healing, for sure.
So just carrying that thought forward, we, each of us, have an opportunity every day to be sending light out, to be seeing the world shifting, not into these low frequency negative events and all these other things, you know, not into a period of dark intensity. So let's do it. I mean, this is our collective consciousness together. That's a frequency. We're all connected in a web worldwide when we do this. And one of the affirmations that sort of sustains me through this period of the COVID and everything is, you know, we are connecting with the worldwide web and the multiverse web of light workers and warriors. And that collaboration alone results in us having outreach and being able to change.
Absolutely. And that goes back to that spiritual practice you should have every day, keeping your mind, your thoughts positive,
Yeah.
and doing your spiritual practice and doing your deep breathing and all these things, and then envisioning, out to your city, your country, your state, and having it get wider and wider. Because I believe, like you, I believe that, one person just starting to do that, and as light workers we all band together,
We
and then the
connect.
light gets brighter. Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Hmm.
And it's so powerful and it's so ignored, So, I mean, the four of us here today, and I'm including you, Kathy, because I feel like, you're getting on your mission.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is something that we can do every single day. As you guys know, I'm a terrible insomniac, so I'm doing it night and day. But this is an opportunity for us. Everybody's always saying, what can I do? I'm just one person. Man, you can do a lot with this. It's so powerful. So it's a cool thing.
There are actually quite a few big projects where millions of light workers are consciously doing it at the
Yes,
same time every day and sending out healing and light and calming and peace. So that's powerful. I mean,
it
that's
is.
really powerful.
So
Good.
let's tune on that. Let's continue with that, because I feel like that energy reaches out during this awakening time and embraces people who are going through this process right now of the spiritual awakening, and helps them realize, hey, you know, I have this ability. I never knew I had it. I never thought I had it, but I have it. And let me use it.
And just a quick way to do that is if you catch yourself feeling afraid or anxious or focusing on some what if scenario you saw in the news, just stop and turn it around and start thinking about what are you grateful for? What have you got right now going on that you're grateful for? What are your blessings? And then just send white light out. I mean, it's as simple as that. And it doesn't mean you have to take an hour out of your day. It's just changing your own thought process, which changes energy. Enough people doing that makes a gigantic difference. That is energy healing on a planetary level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Being mindful of those thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Our thoughts matter a lot. And I don't want to forget to talk about this. I almost did. I can't believe it. So the other thing I do, I consider this healing, even though it's a neuroscience technique, but it's healing, and I'll tell you why. It's thought-field therapy. I've done that for a long time. And the reason I did is I was still working in the field of mental health, and there were clients who could not benefit from therapy because they had such traumatic events that they could not release the trauma around that. They couldn't get around it or through it to benefit from counseling. So I heard about this technique, and then it was considered really fringe. Now people can get master's degrees in it at a university, which, yay.
Wow.
So what it does is it removes emotional attachment to traumatic or painful memories. And I've done it on myself for, gosh, going on 30 years now. And to the point where like things that if I used to even think about it, it'd make me get tearful and I couldn't talk about it without crying. And now I can easily talk about these things because once you go through this process, which takes about 15 or 20 minutes for each memory, it's like you read about it in a book or saw it in a movie. And you can imagine like the freedom that gives people to not feel an emotional attachment to a rape or to childhood abuse or a physical assault. I've done this with a lot of vets, war vets, um, all kinds of situations, even painful divorces, anything that's holding people back. And so I love to do that and then start working with them. And we all do spiritual counseling. That's a really big focus of my work. And before I do that, I like to help people clear the worst of their painful memories so that it's not in the way. It's like these giant pieces of luggage blocking you where you can just see like about here, but you remove those giant pieces of luggage and then you're like, oh no, like, okay, my heart's not full. And so to me, it's a huge piece of healing. And I love doing that.
It's amazing, isn't it? All of this work is so, and I know I'm such a curious being. When I first started energy healing, I went from Reiki to Theta to past life regression. And it was like, I wanted to learn everything. I was taking everything in and quantum healing. But it's amazing how that happens, that your path is set, you know, and then you start learning and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a whole world that I didn't know even existed. And then it shifts your whole perspective about life. So I love that Reiki's becoming mainstream and going into hospitals. My Reiki master teacher actually down in the valley teaches doctors and nurses how to do Reiki with patients, and how it calms them and relaxes them before procedures and all this stuff. And I just think it's so wonderful that we are getting to that space.
Oh, it feels good, doesn't it?
Mm.
We've been friends for a long time. Well, my goodness, and I love your idea for the show, Terry Ann, and we'll talk about that, but I've already marketed the next 2 shows, so they're already set. Thank you for watching the Sedona Soul Sisters Show today. If you'd like more information about us and our services, visit our website at sedonasoulsisters.com. Tune in next week when our topic is allowing people to have their own journey. So just talking about that we're all on a different timetable and space, and we have to honor that and how we can do that, what we're talking about and how we can do that. We hope that you have an enlightening week. Thanks for joining in.
Thank you.
Bye, Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you.